Welcome to episode 3 of Leading Adam. Today we're going to dive into the human experience, learn what that is, and how it's a little or maybe a lot different from employee engagement. We're also going to challenge you to transform lives around you through meaningful connections. So stay tuned.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkert. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation in student retention and education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erica Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com. And I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
Hey, Adam, we're back for episode 3.
We're here.
We are here. We're doing it.
You look so professional.
I feel professional. I'm not used to wearing a jacket.
I feel like I showed up for a rodeo and it was a business meeting.
My husband was shocked when I took this out of my closet this morning, and he said, "Whoa, you're busting out the jacket. That was
Getting
a big deal."
Guns, huh? My wife was not. She's like, "Are you going to the woods?"
Right.
She didn't say anything because she goes to work before I do.
Out chopping wood.
Yes, exactly.
At least, right. Well, awesome. Well, I'm excited for this episode.
Same.
This episode, we're going to dive into human experience, what that is.
Yeah, the meat, right?
The meat of it. Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it in the prior episodes. But I think most importantly, we're going to talk about as well how it is not employee engagement.
Yeah.
Because that word gets used a lot. I hear that it's everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's everywhere in the sense of everybody is measuring it, consulting to it. So that's one level, right? Why is the human experience different than that? But more importantly, it's just a matter of going back to fundamentals. You know, I played basketball in high school, loved basketball, and guaranteed if a team lost sight of the fundamentals, they were going to begin losing. It may not happen right away, but it guaranteed it's going to happen. And it's no different than building a house, right? That foundation is the most important part of the entire build. And it's the one part that you kind of forget about later.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm excited to get to it is we're talking about the foundation, the fundamentals of all those other things begin with the human experience. So, but yeah, we've been dancing around it. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So yeah, with the human experience, how are you defining that? Like, what do you look for in an organization, or what are you looking for to identify human experience, presence or absence of in a team or an organization?
Yeah, so the human experience is fundamentally comprised of 3 elements. All of those elements are really based or rooted in emotional needs for the human side. So why is it the human experience? Because innately as humans, we all share similar needs. And why I love this topic so much is because when you start there, it transcends your social economic status, your geographic location, your ethnicity. It transcends your gender. It transcends all of these components that we spend so many times trying to build programming for in our organizations because at the core base, we're all human. So those 3 things are belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose. That's what makes up the human experience. And you can dig into these in the research if one were so nerdy or inclined. But that's it. When we talk about the human experience, we're talking about those 3 things collectively and in balance, right? Not one outweighing the other. So belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose.
So in contrast, so those are all feelings, like a person feels like they belong. A person feels like there's a sense of shared purpose. A person demonstrates vulnerability. in contrast to engagement, which we could send out a survey,
Sure.
measure that type of thing. So if I'm in an organization and I want to understand how the human experience is within my team, can that even be measured? Is that measurable? Those feelings?
Yeah, it is. We built a tool. When I say we, 240 Solutions built a tool to measure the human experience, and it measures collectively belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose. So in an individual, can I measure your level of belonging? Not really. But when I consider the fact that much like an atom is really a unit of multiple things, and we look at the organization that way, I can measure that experience in community. So while the questions you would answer through the thing gives me an indication of belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose for an individual, it's better understood in the aggregate where there's a community. So yeah, they are ultimately emotion centered. It's how I experience the workplace, my community, my team, relationship with my authority. Those are the end results of what we're measuring, but it's really practical in the sense of what we're asking to get there. And without giving away all the secret sauce, it's simple things. One example, let's use vulnerability. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability being equal to courage, right? That they're essentially synonymous, one and the same. When you look at it through that lens, what is vulnerability in an organization? It's the employee's willingness to say, I have an idea, right? And I would wager to say, and maybe I shouldn't wager, maybe I should just ask you, have you ever been in a situation, a team or organization where you had thoughts to contribute, ideas to contribute, but didn't feel like anyone wanted to hear them, so you just kept them to yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I think we've all experienced that at one way or another. And I certainly early on in my career feeling that way. But yeah, I mean, even you're sitting around a table with multiple people and not really feeling like it's a safe space to share, or is it the right time to share? So sure.
And I that's the tangible essence of vulnerability and why it matters.
Yeah.
Right. Just to create one simple example. So we're talking about emotional needs. These are base needs in us as a human, the need to belong, the need to feel safe, another way to say vulnerability, and the need to have purpose. And for that purpose to be shared amongst my team, those are those fundamentals. But when we really get down to brass tacks, what we're talking about in a meeting is a very technical thing. Is using vulnerability again, is the leader pausing long enough to ask, what do you think? Right? It's just not common.
Right. And those things, they're feelings, and they're so important to your experience as an employee within an organization. And those things, I feel, and maybe you find this as well, have proven this, those are the things that would keep me feeling like I belong, feeling like it's safe to share, feeling like I'm able to be vulnerable and like there's a shared purpose. Those are the things that keep me at an organization, or, you know, I want to get up in the morning and go to work because I feel so good when I get there. Employee engagement, in contrast, those are the ping pong tables, the good benefits.
Beanbags and beer, right? I mean, that's what Google taught us
PTO,
that employee engagement was. Beanbags and beer.
That's right. Those might get people in the door. Those are nice things to include in a job description or a job posting or to advertise. But what's really going to keep people engaged and keep people happy in their work is what you're talking about.
Yeah, because it's human. Right? Without going on a tangent, because I think we want to talk really about like what does this look like in education?
Yeah.
Because it's important as well. But without going off on a tangent, it is those things. And that's why I say it's fundamental. It's based to that. Because at the end of the day, regardless of how good my salary is or my benefits package is, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later, I'm starting to feel like people don't understand me. I'm not heard. I'm overworked. Well, the solution to that is addressing the humanity. And that is that sense of belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose, which I know I'm holding myself back. I know we're going to unpack these deeply as individual things because they deserve their own episode. But that's why it's fundamental because that's what we're searching for.
Right.
It's a void. We can't get away from it. It's who we are. It's what we crave.
Yeah.
And if we did not see that in any greater contrast than COVID, we weren't paying attention.
Right.
Right? The world at first was like, woohoo, work from home.
Yeah.
And like 6 months later, everybody's struggling with depression.
Yeah.
They're feeling isolated. And now we've got a different kind of pandemic on our hands. Right? And that's one that employees can't solve by just adding more pizza parties.
Right.
Right? It's not the way to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a huge transition and something that, I come from old enough to have been working in the workforce long enough that, I have a handful of friends that I've gathered over the course of different roles and different organizations that I, during those in-person times. So, being fully remote now is different. And starting at a new organization where everybody is fully remote was totally different and something I had never experienced before. And so really we talked about self-leadership in the last episode. I hit a low where I was mentally not feeling great, right? I was feeling I could feel myself kind of pulling back a little bit, but addressing that, really reflecting on myself. Okay, Erica, what can you do to change that? And so really leaning in, engaging in different ways through, the channels that I'm able to in that remote environment to make those connections, because that's so important. And I noticed that if I do it, if I tell people good morning in the morning, I'm chatting, I'm talking to people in the group, I'm spending that, being intentional about the ways that I connect with my colleagues and fellow teammates, I feel so much better. They also are responding. So I have to know that they are feeling similarly.
Yeah.
And if I feel better, I am happier when I talk with my students.
Yeah.
There it is. So they're having a better experience with me because I did this little thing that made myself, I was able to connect and feel that touch of humanity, even though I'm fully remote.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about is exactly the dots that connected for me when we deployed a strategy that ended up setting me apart as an expert in student success nationally. It's exactly what you described, because when we dig into student retention data, and it's been this way for years, you dig into student retention data, what you find is that the greatest impact statistically to a student's ability to persist and finish their program is relationship or community with faculty. Okay, so when you start rolling that back, but in the context in which I was working and you were working, was online adult students.
Right.
So how do you take a traditional data point like relationship with faculty and translate that into this context? And so that's where we started. What does that look like? And starting to realize that faculty, if you figure faculty as a body, as a connection point, what you had to realize is that you had admissions folks, you had advisors, you had your account rep, You had your instructor that changed usually every 6 to 8 weeks. And you had a community of people.
Yeah.
And so what we could learn from the data that ended us right where you just said was it is a community and feeling connected to a community that actually helps a student persist. Unfortunately, what we discovered is back to what we said last week, you cannot pour out of an empty cup.
Right.
We were trying to offer community to a student when we didn't have community with one another. That becomes a massive problem.
Yeah.
So when we take that process and we go, wow, our student retention initiatives have to start with making sure we possess what we want them to feel, changes the way you approach student success initiatives.
Absolutely.
So it really, in what you're describing, I think it's not just that you started it and it started to trickle down. That's just the way that it goes.
Right.
This human experience and understanding that whether it's a faculty or a student or an administrator, we're all human and we all want it. And somebody has to take the risk to go first, right? To reach out and say, how are you today?
Right.
It sounds so simple. It almost sounds too simple, right?
Right. That's not real, but it is.
Yeah.
And through the work that you've done, and with 240, what does that look like as you're looking from the outside into an organization? If I'm a lot of times we can't see the forest through the trees. So if I feel like, man, we're really struggling with retention, or it just seems like people aren't really as happy as they should be here, what does that look like if the belonging, vulnerability, and shared purpose aren't in place in an organization? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think there's some physical things, like some real tangible things that we see. But I think the first thing that you'll notice as a leader in a team is this kind of unspoken tension. This sense of irritability.
Sure.
Maybe is a good way to say it. We're less tolerant with each other. And so I think that's probably the more esoteric version of what you're seeing. But it also plays itself out physically in the sense of when our human experience is diminished and we're feeling less valued, less engaged, we're sick more often. That's the data, right? So in some ways, if you're human resources in any organization, not just schools, kind of look at your sick time. Is it being used up? Are people constantly out? Well, the chances are your human experience sucks. And I assure you, upping their pay, giving them more flex time, installing a jeans policy is not going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? The only way to fix human issues is with human actions. And that's where I think we lose it. That's why these three things are so absolutely critical, because we can't get away from it.
Yeah, and you can sense that. It's interesting that you mentioned just the tension that you can feel. It just made me think of any time you've ever been in a restaurant or a doctor's office, and if the staff, you can tell if there's some unspoken tension, right? And the level of service that you receive as a patron or as a patient, you can feel that in a very real way.
The last person I want having a poor human experience,
right,
is the one bringing my food,
exactly,
or making it, or worse, the one who's about to examine me.
Yes,
I want those people to feel like they matter.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I clearly can nerd out about this, but I think going back to education and this bit, there's a study that was done by the Chamberlain College of Nursing. That whole study ended up being labeled a culture of care. Incredible read if you like academic type stuff. But ultimately what they found out is they decided their strategy It's a nursing school. Their strategy for improving their student outcomes was going to be focusing on faculty care. So they invested in the community and the faculty and the now what I would term the human experience of their faculty. What they ended up measuring was not only just improved outcomes in their nursing students, but beautifully improved outcomes in the patient care of those students out after they graduate.
Nice.
Now, obviously, that's a longitudinal study that took years, but in that is a beautiful picture of really what is a waterfall. And as a leader, my primary focus shouldn't be technical fulfillment of a job. It should be your experience as a human being. And that doesn't mean it has to get all squishy.
Right.
But if I focus there, what I've essentially guaranteed is that out of you will flow extra care and extra attention for the thing that you're working on, which 9 times out of 10 is relative to the person, the consumer.
Right.
Right. Whether that's a student or somebody buying an iPhone, it's relative. And that's why from a leadership standpoint, we talk about leading Adam,
Right.
right? The Hebrew word for humanity, leading humanity. If we can get there, we really can make a difference in all the things that we think matter most, productivity, profit. We can impact those just by making sure that you are engaged, that you feel like you matter.
Right. And what I love so much about that is, we talk about just how passionate you and I both are about education. And what an amazing way to send people out into the world and go into organizations, those nurses going into hospitals and into practices and having felt loved and seen and feeling that humanity and going out into the world and interacting with others.
Yeah.
That education is transformative, and that is just one of the many ways that it is and can literally transform the world.
Yeah, it's part of the trailer for Leading Adam is, join us. We can change the world together. I've said for years, transform lives, transform worlds.
Right.
I don't know where the person I interacted with at lunch today will go in their life. But if I treat them with dignity and respect and I see them,
right,
and I use their name, such a simple thing, I have at least put a drop in that bucket that can be poured out. And I think selfishly what we want is I want to fill your bucket so that I can associate myself with all the pouring out that you do. And there again, we're making it about us. All right. I need to be content as a leader knowing that I don't have to fill your bucket. I think that's why we don't do this. But I can't go through an interaction with you without contributing
right
to that bucket. And as the way that it goes and demands and pressures on us to perform in our jobs, we do a lot more taking from the bucket than we do contributing.
Yeah.
And you're right. Education, as far as I'm concerned, there's really only one way to change the world. It's education. Right? We get people, they start to see themselves differently. Their self-concept improves. And if we change that experience by pouring into buckets that pour into buckets, then those buckets go out and pour into buckets.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I think that is a perfect transition into our challenge.
Yeah.
For the listeners.
Got to be practical, right?
Right. How do we take that? How do we apply that?
Yeah. Yeah, because I've heard this before going, that's great, Adam. You spent 10 years researching it. Of course, you know what to do. Well, it all started with looking in the mirror. Because what I know is that the thing that I can do today to value humanity is simply understand my own. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge for you listening today is kind of look in the mirror. Pay attention to what you're feeling. Potentially, you're going to work today feeling isolated. Maybe you're going to work feeling like your idea wasn't heard. Those are human things, and to do that, you have to be a little more comfortable, Erica, with feelings.
Oh.
But so us men, we suck at that. But if we start there and go, what am I feeling as a human? And then take a risk and just make the assumption that someone on your team is also feeling that thing, and then give them what you wish someone was giving to you. It's an easy start. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't last forever because eventually you empty your bucket. But now we're back to self-leadership, right?
Yeah.
You talked about that. How do I invest in myself?
Right.
How do I pour into myself? Mm-hmm. And at least we can do that. So I think the challenge today is look in to pour out mm-hmm. and take a risk.
That connection. Yeah. Take the risk, make the connection.
Yeah. Worst case scenario, right? They weren't feeling isolated, and you expressed gratitude and appreciation for them being anyways.
Exactly.
Did anybody really get hurt there?
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. All right. Well, that was great.
That's a good job. Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.